Hey Trailblazers and Tarmac Tacklers, welcome back to the Maximum Mileage Running Podcast. This is your one-stop shop for everything ultra, road and trail running.
And don't forget, we've got all your off-road adventures covered too.
And I'm your host, Nick Hancock, Head of Coaching here at Maximum Mileage, here to deliver pro advice, humour and inspiration for those of you tackling marathons and beyond.
And I'm Faye Johnson, your co-host. I am also a certified running coach, personal trainer and the resident mountain goat. Whether it's road running or ultra marathons, we've got the tips and tricks to get you through your training.
Exactly. Whether you are squeezing miles into a busy schedule or just dipping your toes into long distance running, we've got your back. So lace up, gear up and get ready for maximum mileage. Let's get into it. Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Maximum Mileage Running Podcast. Today, we are going to be diving into the world of running coaching and why it matters to you as a runner. And I'm really delighted to be able to invite on the show. Joining me is Rick Prince, who is the founder of UESCA, which stands for the United Endurance Sports Coaching Academy. And he is here to share why working with a UESCA certified coach like myself could be a game changer for your running performance. Rick, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And as I was explaining to Rick before the episode started, I'm really keen to get people to understand a little bit more about UESCA because in the UK particularly, we've got UK athletics, which is great. I'm a UK athletics certified coach. But I'm really proud, I'm proud of that, but I'm really proud to say that I'm a UESCA qualified coach because in my mind, the bar has been risen by you guys. I just love the content of the course. It's super up to date. It's really applicable to the application to what we can do with our athletes. And I get many people asking me, what is UESCA? You say you're a UESCA qualified coach, but what is it? And I love talking about it, but I wanted to bring you on so you could tell the good people of the UK and anybody else who's listening a little bit more about it. So yeah, Rick, thank you for for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
Before we dive into all that, tell us a little about yourself.
So I am newly. Well, I shouldn't say newly. I've been out here. I moved to Colorado about 5 years ago. I lived the previous years about 20 years in New York City. I have a bachelor's degree in kinesiology, which is essentially the study of movement, kind of biomechanics type stuff. Didn't quite know what I wanted to do after I got out of college, and ended up sort of in the fitness industry for about 20 years. Mostly living in New York City. I worked as a personal trainer that entire time, as well as I got into managing health clubs as well, both commercial and corporate health clubs. And at the same time, I was also doing some cycle coaching and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so that's a little bit of background of myself and as sort of my background educationally and work-wise. Mm-hmm. I've held many certifications over the years in the fitness industry, and I just felt like, there was a need for something a little bit more. The fitness industry is very similar to the coaching industry, at least in the United States, and the fact that it's completely unregulated. It's not like a lawyer or a doctor or even like a plumber, where you have to have a license or a degree or whatever to be able to practice. So as a result, you get this wide spectrum of knowledge out there. Everything from, incredible coaches, incredible personal trainers to terrible coaches and terrible personal trainers and everything in between. Yeah. And while that's probably largely the case in any profession, I think it's really exaggerated in the coaching and personal training industries due to that lack of regulation and things like that. So the goal for me, was sort of combining my education, my degree in kinesiology with my sport background. I used to race bikes a lot growing up. I ran cross country and track in college. So the goal was to combine all that knowledge and create a certification that was very strong in science, very strong in evidence-based. And not to say that once you're a UESCA certified coach, again, you're the world's best coach, because that's, it's
a coaching
to become a great. Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's an ongoing process. But my goal was just to provide knowledge to coaches so that sort of what you alluded to, so that we could raise the bar a little bit as far as what the standards were that a coach would understand. Primarily that they understand how the body works, physiology, biomechanics, all that kind of stuff, and then be able to apply that on an individual basis for each runner, triathlete, cyclist, ultra runner, whoever they're coaching. So yeah, so that's a little bit of background about me. Like I said, my endurance sports background, degree in this field, and primarily a fitness background, and sort of smashed all that together to create UESCA.
Yeah, great work. And I mean, the thing that you've alluded to it, that science-based model that you guys work to, and UESCA isn't just you. You work with some great people. I mean, you've got your right hand woman, Cindy, who does some great stuff.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's awesome. I love Cindy.
Yeah, she's the brains of this operation.
You work with the likes of Jason Koop, talking about the ultra running world. Tell us a little bit more about who else you've got contributing to the various different certifications, what the certifications are in UESCA.
I appreciate that question. So we have 5 different certifications right now. We have the running, ultra running, cycling, triathlon, and we recently just did a nutrition certification as well. Not that you're going to be a nutritionist or a dietitian when you're done, but it's a very in-depth look at nutrition, a lot of the science, as it applies to working with endurance athletes. So that was done with Bob Seeberhar, who is a sports dietitian. He works with a lot of national governing bodies. He trains a lot of Olympians, all that kind of stuff. To answer your question, so when I first started UESCA, it was just me. It was very much of a side gig while I was still working as a personal trainer. The triathlon one is the first one we did. So I spent months and months just delving into all the peer review articles online, from PubMed, POLS1 to get real research to create that certification.
Lots of work on your own. Kudos.
It is.
Kudos to you, man.
I still have nightmares from that, I think. But as we progressed, what we've done is we've decided that ourselves, myself, Cindy, and whatever else, we're not going to create any of the content ourselves unless it's directly in our wheelhouse, something, say, sports, strength and conditioning or personal training based. So our goal is to seek out the absolute best people for each area that we're going to provide content in. So, for example, I'll just list the cycling certification that we did. So we got are you familiar with Cannondale bicycles?
Yep. Yeah. CAD 13, I think, was their marquee one until quite recently.
Yeah. Now they have some like Super 6 and all that stuff. So we reached out to Dr. Nathan Barry, who is a PhD in aerodynamics. He's their head aerodynamics guy. So he provided the aerodynamics, the drafting section, what role does a bike and equipment play in aerodynamics? I think she's a 3 or 4-time national champion in cyclocross in the U.S. here. Meredith Miller, Ashton Lambie. We reached out to gravel. We reached out to some of the coaches for the U.S. national cycling team for content. Dr. Justin Ross, sports psychologist, for the psychology section. So it's just sort of an example of we sort of our process to do this is we look at all the different modules we want to create, all the different topics, and then we do a lot of due diligence, a lot of vetting to say, okay, who would be the best person to create this content? Because, the reality is, you're spending money on one of our products. You're going to spend a lot of time studying. You deserve to have the absolute best content. It shouldn't just be from like all the chapters are done by me, or what I think. And I think that's another distinction, is that a lot of the certifications out there are done by individuals. Some of the other are competitors. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but, it's sort of that N of one, right? It's like they're writing about their own personal philosophy, their own personal experience, and it may work for you, it may not. But we're saying, look, we're just going to find the experts and stay out of their way, let them do their thing.
I think the other thing that struck me about what you guys are doing at UESCA is everything is so up to date, and not wanting to beat down UK athletics for their content was so out of date. I remember sitting in the course going, we know that's not right anymore. When are you going to update the content? And
Sure.
Not to say that UK athletics is bad, because there was plenty of really good stuff. Actually,
Sure.
teaching you how to be a coach was fantastic, but some of the science was pretty out of date. So I think that's one of the things I love about you guys, is that you're constantly updating your material based on the meta analyses that are coming out, and and whatever studies are there to back up the content of the course. So on that subject, how do you help coaches to apply that science? Because there are so many coaches out there that say, I'm science based, and actually the application of that is where the art comes in. So how are you guys helping? Sure. How are you guys helping coaches to sort of apply that science into the art?
Yeah. Well, again, another good question. So the first few modules of every certification is sort of that science-based stuff that you're talking about, anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, all that sort of stuff. And then from then on, it goes into pretty much, to your point, the application of it, whether it be gait analysis, how to create a running program, injury and illness, sports psychology. And I think the thing that's unique about UESCA is that, and this is one thing that we get a lot of, I don't want to say hate mail about, but the things that people are a little upset about is we don't provide training programs. We don't, because I think a lot of people, when they come into a certification, they expect there to be a bunch of pages like, okay, give this to your athletes if they're training for a 5K or 10K or half marathon. Yeah. And the reality is everybody responds to the same training stimuli in a different way. It's not, you have no idea what your athlete's schedule might be or whatever. So while training templates are fine to use as, sort of a reference point, they're not something that should be just randomly doled out to everybody. So I think that's one of the other differences. So the whole point to your point about the application is we teach a science, then we teach all these different areas, just give them all the information. And then we basically say, look, it's up to you to take all this information that you've learned and apply it on an individual basis to your athletes, to your clients. And that's, I would say, the other distinction is, I'm not quite sure how UK athletics is. This is how it works in the United States with our governing bodies and a lot of other certifications. There's the levels of certification. So you're level 1 coach, you're level 2, you're level 3. And it's something that personally I've never really understood, because to me, like, if I'm going to pay money to hire a coach, I want the best possible coach. I want that person knowing everything, for lack of a better word. I don't want them to just be this entry-level coach, even if they might cost a little bit less. So we don't have levels of certifications. Ours are just one very comprehensive certification. And the way how we view that is that you're pretty much, again, you're not going to be the world's best coach right out of the gate, but you're going to have all the requisite knowledge to be able to work with individuals. And now we have these specialization programs. So let's say you take the running course. One of the things we're working on right now is the running gait analysis specialization course. So you can sort of pick the different areas that you want to learn more about with these specialization courses, instead of being like, oh, I got to go up to a level 2 coach now. So yeah, that's the other, I would say, sort of distinction that ours versus a lot of others that have sort of those different levels or tiers associated with them.
Yeah, in the UK, there are various different levels. I went through the LERF curve route, which is leader in running fitness, which is basically means that you can take people on a group run, and then coaching running fitness, which is being able to actually coach and be insured to coach people as well, which is another, I think, really important point that, again, for those people listening, that that is really important. You are doing something that is a physiological activity, and there are risks with that. And if your coach is not insured, then you might find yourself in trouble. So be really careful with that.
Yeah, for sure. And on that note, one of the things I advise coaches here in the US is making sure the policy is very specific. So, for example, some policies here, let's say if you're a cycling coach, it might only cover indoor cycling, like spin classes. It might not actually cover outdoor running, or it might cover outdoor running on pavement, but not on trails. So it's very specific. You definitely want to speak to an insurance provider that can advise you on exactly what you're going to be doing with your athletes, and then finding a policy to match. What we typically advise here is a $1 million per occurrence policy. is what we advise in the United States here. And usually you can get a policy like that for between like $100 to $300 USD annually.
Yeah. Who else have you got that's been doing the content for the courses? So I mentioned Jason Koop, and for those listening, Jason is widely regarded as, I guess, the GOAT when it comes to ultra running coaching. I listened to his podcast, great podcast. So who else have you got? You mentioned Bob Seeberhar for the running nutrition.
Yep, Bob for nutrition. We have Dr. Justin Ross, who is a clinical sports psychologist. He's based here in Denver. He's also an ultra athlete and himself did the Leadville 100 mountain bike race. For the running, we have Nell Rojas. She has a degree in exercise science. She's a coach. She's also a professional runner for Nike, a marathon runner for Nike. Not this past year, but the 2 previous years at the Boston Marathon, she was the top professional female American at the Boston Marathon, and she is incredibly knowledgeable. Primarily, she's not an academic per se, like she's never taught at a university, but she kind of has that perspective, how she looks at stuff, primarily because she's been a coach for forever herself. On the triathlon side, we have Dr. Matt Hansen, who is also a professional triathlete. He's won the North American Ironman Championship, I think, 4 or 5 times. He was a former academic. He actually, interesting story about him, he was up for tenure the same day as he had to decide if he was going to go pro or not in the triathlon world, and he opted to go pro. So he's working with us. We did a lot of videos with him on the triathlon course. Dr. Chris Myers, who is a PhD in physiology. He's currently working with the U.S. Air Force, I believe, over in Germany in human performance. He did a lot of contributions to the triathlon course. So yeah, a lot of contributors across. Corrine Malcolm. She has a master's degree in environmental physiology. We just had her on our podcast recently, talking all about the effects of altitude, humidity, heat, cold, pollutants, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the goal is to kind of find these people that it's a challenge, because you want to find people that know their stuff, but can also, for lack of a better word, sort of dumb it down and put it in a way that someone like myself can understand, because it's a lot of it's really complex stuff. That's the challenge, is once we find these people, we're okay, great, you're super smart, but can you either talk about it or write about it in a way that the general public can understand, in a way that's consumable? So that's our challenge. That's one of our big challenges, I should say, when we decide to vet people, because oftentimes we'll talk to somebody like, wow, you have like 10 million PhDs and whatever, you're super smart, and then they start talking and I can't understand a word they say. It's like way over my head. So that's a challenge, but I feel like we found a very good group of people right now to present in this conference that we're having. For example, we have Dr. Stephanie Howe. She's a former winner of Western States PhD, and so she's presenting on ultra running specific nutrition. We got Walter Hukamer. He's a professor at University of Massachusetts. He'll be presenting on biomechanics, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a long process to find the right people, but it's absolutely worth it, because like I said, if someone's going to be paying money for our products, they deserve to get the best value and to your point, the most recent information.
Yeah, and unbiased information as well. I think that's really
key.
Important. Is that it is unbiased. It's not, going down one path. Actually, yes, it's all very science based. But it's very much with an open mind as well. And one thing that the science says over here might not actually work for that person over there. And that's where the art of coaching then comes in.
Yeah. And you see it all the time. You hear it all the time, right? Like, hey, this person can run a 2-hour marathon or a 2:10 marathon, therefore they have to be a great coach. That has no correlation to being a great coach. Maybe they're a terrible coach because they have great genetics and they just can't relate to someone that runs a 5-hour marathon, there's no, and you see that on coaches' bios a lot, on coaches' websites. You'll see the races they did, what their PRs are, and that's great. It's all fine. But if it's done for the purpose of marketing, I definitely want your listeners to know that there is zero correlation between being a fast runner or a high performer and being a great coach. I do think it's helpful that you are a runner, so you understand, what your athletes are going through and all that kind of stuff. But being fast and talented is absolutely not a prerequisite to being a great coach.
No, 100%.
Without a doubt. But I think a lot of people assume that, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do choose coaches based on their athletic performance rather than their coaching ability. And actually, you only need to look into some of the greatest coaches in sport. Actually, like Teddy Atlas, he was only an amateur boxer, but he coached Mike Tyson.
Exactly. Exactly.
There's plenty of other examples. In fact, there's one in the running world. David Rudisha, the 5,000 meter world record holder, or former world record holder. Is he former, or does he still hold it? Anyway, his coach.
I think he's former. I think. Yeah.
Anyway, his coach, Brother Colm, like a little Irishman that moved to Africa, walks around with I think he walks around with a stick, but never been a runner in his life. And I think that's where I love to give that example, because I put my hands up. I've never run 100-miler ultramarathon, but I've coached plenty of people to 100-miler.
Sure, absolutely.
I've done up to 50.
Yeah,
but I've not done 100. And people go, well, how can you coach people if you haven't done it? It's not. I think actually sometimes your own experience can bias the decisions that you make for your athletes.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's, to your point, that's what is great about having these very high level educated contributors, because they don't look at things through. I mean, I'm sure there's always a little bit of bias there, but not to the extent where, my certification, you see these people out there, it's their system. And I hate that word system, but it's always like, this is my system. This is what works for me and my athlete. So it's going to work for you. Well, it might work for you, but it also might not. And so I think it's a method. Yes.
Yes,
exactly.
Insert coach name here, method.
Yes. And I get it, people want simple, people want fast, which is why, diets are always around, and people just tell me how to do it. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Boom. I absolutely understand the people want that, but the reality is, from a coaching perspective, that's just not how it works. And it's a harder route to go the right way to learn all this stuff about how the body works, how to apply it on an individual basis, but it's absolutely the right way to do it. And again, like I said, a lot of or the people that write into us and be like, look, I bought your certification. Why isn't there a template? And so I can tell coaches, here's your program. Like, well, that's why we taught you all that stuff, so you can do that on your own. We don't supply that for you. So that's always sort of an interesting thing.
Yeah. And that's why I tend to stay away from, I won't name any names, but there are some, very well-known coaches that have some very well-known books that have now got very well-known coaching certifications that come with lots of templates and lots of workout libraries. And I quite like making my own workouts and putting funny names on them for my athletes. So when they, they get a session in their plan that says Hurty McHurt-a-lot, or
I love that.
Just fun names.
I'm going to steal that one.
Yeah. I can send you the session. Anyway, so a lot of my personal athletes, and a lot of people that will be listening to this, won't be elite athletes, and they'll be thinking, well, there's a lot of science here. I'm not an elite athlete. This all sounds like it's very much for an elite athlete, but a lot of people that go out there to get coaching are, regular people. They've got jobs, they've got kids, they've got busy lives. And how can a UESCA coach benefit, somebody like that?
Yeah. Well, again, it's a really good question. I think that's a common, for lack of a better word, misconception. We have had Nell Rojas on our podcast. Another contributor to our running session is Ben Rosario, who is the head coach of the Northern Arizona Elite, the HOKA Northern Arizona Elite running team, which is one of the top professional running teams in the United States here. And so I ask them that question a lot, just because I'm interested to hear what their feedback is. I say, look, what's the difference? Like, what's the magic sauce between how your coach trains you, professional, Olympic, whatnot, distance runner, and me, who just wants to go out there and run a 10K? And it's really interesting, their response. I said, all of the sort of all of the principles that apply to a professional, for the most part, apply to the age grouper or the average runner, for lack of a better word. It has to do with scale. It has to do with workload. We obviously didn't choose our parents as well as some of them did, that they have these amazing genetics. And also it's their job, right? So they can go out for a 3-hour, 4-hour run and then come home and sit on the couch all day. They can recover better because they don't have a job to go to and whatnot. So, but the principles, there's not a lot of difference. A lot of it's just scale, as far as distance. So that being said, to get back to your original question, because of that, the same training methodologies, the same science, the same physiology, the way how the body responds to stress, it's all the same, whether it's, you run a 6-hour marathon or you run a 2-hour marathon.
Yeah.
As you get faster and as you reach your sort of your limit, your genetic and your physiological limit, it gets harder to see gains. It's kind of like losing fat, right? Like it's easy to lose a lot of fat in the beginning. And as you get closer to your goal weight, it gets harder and harder. And then you have to bring in more resources and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I do think professionals have an advantage. They have sort of their village around them, sports psychologists and massage therapists and all that kind of stuff. But at the very core of it, it's all the same. It just has to do with scale. The information in our certifications are just as applicable to training, me, the 5K, 10K runner who just wants to go out and do the turkey trot as it does, running an elite marathon.
Yeah, cool. One thing with the UESCA coaching certification is that we get access to a community. So
correct.
Really great Facebook group, very active. You guys, Cindy is like, she responds quicker than we can ask the questions sometimes.
Yeah.
She's always on there just, to answer everybody's questions. So, how does that benefit a runner when, us coaches, we're not just doing this alone. We do actually have, the support. And I see questions on there all the time from people, including myself, saying, hey, I've got this runner who has, X problem. How do I solve it with, Y, protocol, whatever it might be. And, how do you think that benefits the runners out there?
It's really interesting. The number one piece of feedback that we get from our coaches are, I took your certification because I wanted to learn how to be a coach, and it's great and all and whatever, but the real value is that Facebook coaches group, which is not what I would have expected. I think the value there is that the coaches know that all the other people in the group, and I think there's like 1,200 coaches in there now, I think are in that coaches group. They know that they all went through our certification. So they know that these are individuals that have a respect for science, that come at their training and racing and coaching all more or less from the same angle. Of course, there'll be different opinions in there, which is a good thing. But by and large, I think everyone knows that, okay, that sort of bar is here. So everyone has this base level of knowledge. And I think they feel more comfortable asking questions in that group than they would, say, going out into the internet and asking it on some random, forum or something like that. Yeah. And honestly, when I created the Facebook group, it was honestly more of just hey, here's a benefit. I truly didn't appreciate, and shame on me, the value that it would bring to the coaches. But we hear that all the time, that your certification is great. It taught me a lot of stuff. But, the thing that I find the most value in, especially post-certification, is that coaches group where I can ask a question and get all this feedback from all these different people. And then similar to the certification, they take all this information and advice from other coaches, and they sort of aggregate and almost use this little meta-analysis and say, okay, here's how I'm going to then go forward. Here's how I think I should proceed with whatever the issue was that they asked in the Facebook group. So I appreciate you asking about that. And it definitely is one of the biggest, I think, benefits that I'm finding, via feedback from our coaches.
Yeah, I think your coaching can be a really lonely world. And you've got to make decisions for these people that are paying you good money, that want to get a great result of, for the race that, a lot of people put so much heart and soul in and investment in these races. And it can be lonely if you don't have that, that shoulder to kind of lean on to say, hey, what do you think about this? And it's not just one person that we get to ask. Like you say, it's 1,200 people in that group, and it's 1,200 really great people. Not just you guys at UESCA, but generally the coaching community in there is fantastic. So I think anybody who is UESCA qualified, and if any of you listening out there that we're thinking about getting a coach, and you see UESCA and you think, well, I'm not just getting one coach, I'm actually getting 1,200 and more. Growing.
Yeah, and I'll add to it. I mean, like this is my job, right? I mean, I'm interacting all day with these high level, contributors. Like yesterday, I was up at the Training Peaks headquarters. The other day, I was down in Colorado Springs with the USA Triathlon headquarters. So I'm talking to all these people all the time that are super smart. But that being said, I'll go into the Facebook group, and I feel like I learn just as much, if not more, from that group than I do in other areas that I interact with people. So it's an incredible resource, and I find myself, just as learning just as much as the fellow coaches in there. So I certainly personally appreciate it as well, just as a learning experience.
Yeah. Rick, I've got a final couple of questions for you. So
sure.
Since you've got an endurance background, could you just sort of touch upon how you would feel about having a UESCA certified coach, and how you feel that would be beneficial for someone training for something like an ultra marathon or a marathon?
Yeah, again, there are a lot of options out there, or a fair amount of options when it comes to coaching things. I think when you're looking for a coach to hire for whatever, ultra, cycling, triathlon, whatever it is, I think there's a lot of factors. I think there's the education piece for sure, like what is it? And also just their philosophy, because what we found is a coach's philosophy will largely shape what type of certification they're going after. If they're just looking to spend a couple hours doing something just to get a piece of paper and say they're a certified coach, there's an option for that. If like you said, if they want to, they really like this one coach and their philosophy or system or method, as you said, they're going to go that route. So I think our certification sort of naturally selects people that sort of have our philosophy of it. I think it's important because, again, if I were hiring a coach, I would want them to have all this science, kind of like when you go to your doctor, right? Like, at the very least, no matter what their specialty is, they all had to go through medical school. They all have that core training. They know how the body works. I would want my coach to have that knowledge, to know how the body works, and then how to apply it. The other thing too, I think it's important to note is, and this is important, I think, when a coach, because it's not just about their credentials. I think when an athlete interviews a coach, is also to know that it's a relationship, for better or worse. And like some relationships, they're great, some are terrible, and a lot are in the middle. So I think also just the philosophy of the coach, the personality of the coach, is that coach professional? Do they return emails on time? My wife had a friend who was trying to hire a triathlon coach when we lived in New York City. He emailed like 4 coaches and no one ever got back to him. And, it's kind of like, here, take my money, and no one would take it. It's just like, why do you even have a coaching business if you don't return emails, and especially emails on time? So
I get the opposite. Like I get, oh my God, that was quick.
Yes, and that means you're doing a good job.
You can quiet. I'm sat by my phone. Why would I ignore it and just go, "Oh, I'll respond in a week," or not respond at all?
For sure.
Right. That level of service, I think, is so important in our industry, because it is hyper competitive. It is hyper competitive. What you said right at the beginning, there are so many coaches out there. Unfortunately, the UK is exactly the same as the US. It isn't regulated. Whilst there are insurance nuances and issues for people who don't have insurance, if something did go wrong, it is unregulated. And there are a lot of, I hate to say it, but there are a lot of Instagram coaches out there still.
Yeah.
I think that's regulating a little bit since COVID has kind of passed us a little bit, but
yeah. And that's a good point too. That's the other side with Instagram and all these things, is that like, it's not just oftentimes your what your race time was, to promote that as being a good coach. But now it's also, look at me, I have a 6-pack. I look like a professional runner, therefore hire me, or, and or showing stretching routines, which are terrible, or whatever it may or may not be. So yeah, hiring a coach it's a big decision. Because it's someone that you're going to be working with all the time. And I also think it's important that that some of your listeners know that, the coach that might be perfect for you today might not be perfect for you 2 years down the road.
100%.
It's sort of like, and you see it in athletics all the time, right? Like someone hires a coach and they get them up to a certain point, and then that coach can no longer really get them to that next level. So then they look for another coach. So yeah, it's a process, but I think a lot of it's the education. It's finding a coach that shares your philosophy, a coach that you feel that you have good rapport with, and someone who's a professional, can communicate well, and has your best interest as an athlete at heart. And it's not just about, like if that coach says, I have 6,000 clients, I would run the other direction, because that they clearly they can't manage that much. So you're probably going to get a templated program. So yeah, just really kind of interviewing the coach, the prospective coach, to make sure that this is the person that would hopefully work for you. And again, sometimes it doesn't, and that's not good or bad. That's just what it is.
Yeah, 100%. Rick, you pretty much answered my second question. So we'll start to wrap up. But Rick, if you could say to anybody who was maybe in doubt of getting a coach, a UESCA coach, particularly, what would you say to them?
I would say do it. I mean, here's the thing. I think that at the core of it, and it's not even necessarily a UESCA coach certification. And while we've talked about sort of the benefits of what we believe to be ours, and some maybe things that aren't so ideal about the others, I do want to say that if someone is going to put the time and effort and money to get any coaching certification, that alone to me is a pretty big deal, because it means that they're taking their journey to be a running coach seriously. They're not just putting up their hand and be like, I'm a running coach, that's not necessarily bad either. They might be the most amazing coach ever. But I do think that when people decide to further their education, it's showing almost a vulnerability that they, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe I can learn something to become better, whatever coaching certification that is. Do I think ours is a little bit more comprehensive in sort of what I envision to be the right way, or what I believe to be the right way? Yes. But at the same time, I think the most important thing is that people are getting educated. That can even be going and doing the research themselves on some of these, research or going to Google Scholar and start typing in stuff about running and just educating themselves. That's the most important thing I would say, is just educating yourselves, be a student of the sport. So when you go out for a run, don't just do it passively. Think, okay, well, why did my knee or ankle do that? And then come back and research it. That's what makes a good coach, someone who's always wants to learn. It's a never-ending process, and if you take our certification and you stop your learning process there, I guarantee you're going to be a terrible coach, probably from a knowledge-based side 2 years down the road, because new research, new training practices are always coming out.
Well, we have to recertify, don't we? Every 2 years? Yes.
Every 2 years. Yeah. And the other thing I'll say too is, and this is common within sports, is that a lot of times the training is ahead of the research, and meaning, you as a coach might do XYZ interval, and it works for all your clients, but you don't actually know the science behind it. You just know that it works. It's science's job to then explain why it works. So again, I think, a lot of coaches that have a lot of experience that even might not even have a background in physiology or whatnot, or have a certification, they could be amazing coaches. They can't necessarily explain why it works, but they know it does. And again, because good research takes a while. So I would just say to aspiring coaches, I think a certification is the right way to go. I think it validates and puts a credential out there to say you're serious about this. But I think the most important thing is that you are educating yourself, and you continue to educate yourself.
100%. I always say an educated runner is a better runner, but also an educated coach is a better coach. Yeah,
100%. Couldn't agree with you more.
Rick, it's been fantastic having you on. And everybody listening, I hope that you have taken something away there. I think for anybody who is considering getting a coach, whether they're UESCA qualified or not, I think a coach is a fantastic thing. I've helped some of my clients just save some money each month because they were going out and buying things like the latest shoes because that was going to get them the extra 3% because that's what Nike told them, and it didn't get them extra 3%. So I stopped them from buying the shoes and things like that. And there are great coaches out there that can help you do things like that. So even if it's just from a cost perspective, we're there to help you. Everybody is elite in my eyes. Having a coach isn't just reserved for professionals, professional runners, professional endurance athletes. And in fact, I think there's more benefit to some, amateur runners, people who just love going out for a run and doing a marathon and doing an ultra marathon, can even get even more benefit from a coach than a pro can.
Yeah, and the last. Yeah, I agree 100%. Because not that coaching a professional is easy, but like I said, most professionals, that's their job. So you can tell them to go out for that 4-hour run and then just do nothing for the next day or two. They can do that. But when you're trying to train someone for an ultra marathon and they have a family with 3 kids, they have a job, they have all these other obligations that get in the way of putting in some serious volume, that's a challenge. In tweaking that and fitting that in, and the kids come home sick from school, and then they get sick. It's I would argue that from a training program construction perspective, it's much harder working and much more of a challenge working with the normal average person out there than it is with the pro, because the pro just doesn't have all those variables that oftentimes, sometimes they do, sometimes they have family and a job, but generally they're much more flexible with what they can or cannot do when it comes time to the coach's suggestions. I would say something to an athlete and be like, I can't do that at my kid's soccer game is in. I can't, I can't rest or do my run then or go for a bike ride. Like I have to squeeze it in this, between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m., so it's a challenge. And I think to be a good coach, you have to be very flexible, and you have to understand that it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be, you're trying to just progress. It's not about perfection. It's about progressing and getting that person the best they can be with what you got, versus a professional. You bring in every single person that can help. You bring every single resource in to get them that last 1% to hopefully win. And that's not what we're dealing with, for the average person. We're dealing with screaming kids and work and injuries and mowing the lawn and all that other stuff.
Yeah, you just basically explained my life.
Yeah, there you go. Same.
No, I 100% agree with all that. And I have a saying: fit running into your life, not life fit into your running. Because
I like that.
Because that's when
I like that.
You've got to think of it this way, right? Training is stress, and then screaming kids, jobs, mowing the lawn, all that stuff is stress. And if you've got too much stress coming from both sides, that's when we're dealing with things like injury and illness.
100%.
And that's where I think that's where the art of coaching comes in. You can take all that science, apply it to the art, and go, right, I've got an athlete. I've mentioned him on a couple of podcasts already, called James. He can only run 3 days a week. That's it. That's all the training he can do, plus one strength session. And I've got him to a 3:08 marathon, a 145-mile ultra marathon 3 or 4 weeks ago. He's done 50 milers.
That's impressive.
100 milers. Yeah, I mean, he's got a very strong mind, which does help. But from a physiological point of view, it's about, right, you've got 3 runs a week. What can we do in those 3 runs a week that are going to benefit you based on, the science, the science base that I've got from UESCA and all the other education I've done. So
yeah, that's a challenge. Kudos to you. I mean, when you told me that limited amount of time, and then you told me what he just did in those times, that is good job. That's impressive. I would be like, don't work with me, work with another coach.
No, he's a good guy. He's easy to work with. Anyway, Rick, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And I look forward to doing more UESCA courses. I know you mentioned the gait analysis one. I'll definitely be looking out for that. I'm going to be doing the nutrition one myself pretty soon. So
perfect. Well, thank you so much thanks for having me. It's been great chatting with you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, awesome. Thanks, Rick.
Yep, you got it.
And that's another lap done on the Maximum Mileage Running podcast. Thank you for joining me. and my athletes and my guests on this wild ride through the world of ultra, road and trail running. And remember, whether it's a mountain trail or the local road, every mile you conquer makes you stronger. Keep pushing, keep laughing, and of course, keep swearing when that hill just seems a little too steep. If you enjoyed today's journey, don't forget to subscribe and leave me a nice review. Your feedback does help me go that extra mile. Until next time, this is your host, Nick Hancock, reminding you to make every mile count. Run long, run strong, and run with maximum mileage. Catch you on the next run.